Well, hello and welcome. I'm excited to talk about something that's very near and dear to my heart. That is assets and the asset lifecycle, and something that Velrada and Microsoft has done is found ways to go ahead and optimize that asset lifecycle. So, for right now, I'd like to introduce the crew that will be talking with you. First, we have Brian Elliott. Brian.
Morning, Brian Elliott, Microsoft Business Application Sales, cover Dynamics 365 and Power Platform.
Nick.
Nick Saban with Microsoft, same role as Brian. We just cover a different set of accounts.
David.
The general manager of product for Velrada, so I'll be taking you through some of the tools that we have to help in industry.
My name is Dan Separati. I'm the North America Dynamics lead for Velrada, and I also want to take this opportunity to one of our partners from Chevron, who's been able to join us. So excited to have John here today. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. My name is John Monning. I'm a digital product owner for our wells function at Chevron. Manage several products that we use to drill, complete, work over, abandon some of our oil and gas assets.
Awesome. All right, so we're excited. We've got a lot of information to go through today. One of the things that's kind of the base of everything we're talking about is the Microsoft's Operations Cloud. So we'll let Microsoft go into that. Tell you all a little bit about who Velrada is, and then we're going to dive into optimizing the asset lifecycle. So between asset design, through asset construction, asset maintenance. Any questions from there, please chime in. Please drop questions into the chat. We'll be able to address them as we can, and we'll go from there.
Sounds great. All right, so we're going to introduce Microsoft's Cloud for Operations today. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to anybody listening live or on the recording. So good to have you here. Microsoft, we're a big company. We cover a lot of different customers, a lot of different areas. And one thing that's consistent across Microsoft, we want everybody on the planet to be able to achieve more. Every person, every organization. And so we take a very human-centric approach in a lot of our solutions, and we really do want to help the oil and gas industry drive unprecedented efficiency. You look at some of the factors that are coming up against oil and gas, it very, very much efficiency is all over what we hear about. We need innovation too. What got us here is not going to be what gets us, into the future, and there's going to be a lot more challenges in the future. So we want to help. We want to help companies. We want to help people solve problems, and we want to help deliver business outcomes, and we want to help our customers be, really world-class effective, just like it says there. So if we go the next slide. And we think about, oil and gas, and these probably are not new themes to anybody in oil and gas, but we see this all the time, insufficient tools. I was just at a customer location last week, and even though they've got some great tools that they're implementing, there's still plenty of spreadsheets and paper that are out there that are being used. And so those aren't always the most efficient. Aging workforce, man, that was a big thing, both aging and turnover in their workforce. So when you think about the skill gaps and training and some of the other topics that are really front and center for our customers. Those are things that we think about. We think about solving those problems. But working with oil and gas, it's very asset centric too. So we're gonna a little bit more about Operations Cloud, but we're here with Velrada today because our customers also think about the asset. They think asset centric as well. And so you bring Microsoft together with something like Velrada, you get a really awesome blend of the two philosophies, and they're able to take the Microsoft tools, very human-centric, and then put a very asset-centric view over it. And so let's go to the next slide. So bringing Microsoft and Velrada together, it's exactly what we're trying to do. We want to empower your workforce. We want to empower your people to solve problems, whether those are asset-centric problems, people-centric problems, and deliver the outcomes that you're trying to achieve. One thing, I would be probably slapped by my boss if I didn't say, if I didn't talk about, our AI focus for our company. We have a massive focus on artificial intelligence, as you probably know, and that's only going to continue to grow. And so we're not really I'm going to focus too much on AI today. You guys may have a few things to say if questions come up, but we definitely do have a great focus there. So a lot more to come, and the transformation that AI is going to bring is really going to be unparalleled as anything else that we've seen in the industry. All right, next slide. So cloud for operations. So really, what are we talking about? From a Microsoft perspective, we think about getting the right person to the right place, at the right time, with the right skills and the right equipment. Sounds very simple, and we do like to think of it, very simplistically in those terms, but that's really hard to do. It's really hard to do for a lot of reasons. Disconnected systems, old habits, what have you, failed implementations in the past even sometimes, make people resistant to wanting to try something new. But we're all about delivering outcomes such as, increasing your productivity, increasing service quality, increasing accuracy in the work that you do in the field. And so we're all about enabling the person in the field to do everything they can. And if you get the right person there, just like it says, and they have all the right skills and the right tools and everything with them, it's a whole lot easier for them to be effective when they're on site. And so how do you achieve flawless operations? We believe it's those 5 things. You bring those together with a Microsoft platform. And now, like I said, the AI capabilities that are going to be supporting that solution are just, even better. Next slide, please. And then who do we impact? So, really, it all comes down to, making your people successful, whether you're a CEO or a C-level executive, a field engineer, field tech, ops management, or if you're a customer, service companies out there. I mean, they do everything for their customers, of course. A little different with the operators, but they still have internal customers that they think about. No matter what the persona is, we're trying to drive these types of outcomes, for them that we have listed up there. So I won't drain the slide and go through everything, but again, we want to make it as easy as possible to focus on the task at hand, to get the outcomes that you guys need to be successful, drive your share price up, whatever those business outcomes are that you're trying to achieve.
Excellent. Thanks, Nick.
Got it.
All right, so take a few moments, let David, been a long time Velradian, kind of introduce you all to Velrada.
So Velrada's been working with Microsoft for over 15 years now in implementing the Microsoft stack of solutions, especially the business applications for industry and organizations. And we've been recognized quite regularly by Microsoft for the work that we're doing for our customers in that space. In those implementations, we learned that there was a lot of opportunity to make tools relevant for industry and really enhance the capability in those spaces. So we went a step further and started building out our own product suite that sits on top of the Microsoft platform that provides those extra features that are relevant to industry. So our solutions, we worked globally with clients. Initially out of Australia as the source of Velrada, but we are now based in both Europe and also Northern America. So you can see that we've worked with businesses all around the globe in implementing these particular solutions. And as I mentioned, we've started to build some of our own IP in here to really kind of accelerate and improve the opportunities for organizations. So this slide here talks about a number of the Microsoft offerings in the business application space around the customer service, field service, project service, finance, etc. The purple section in the middle is what Velrada is adding on top to enhance these particular offerings. So today we're going to be focusing on the Power Worker for assets primarily, but we also have other tools such as Power Roster that help with your workforce management when it comes to oil and gas and your swings, your rotors, your hitches, depending on the terminology you use for how your staff are scheduled and rostered. Down the bottom, you can see Azure, because everything that Microsoft builds and we build is heavily coupled with Azure, giving us a lot of capabilities in the AI space, the integration space, and that machine learning to really get the most out of the platform. All of this is underpinned with the Power Platform itself. There's a lot of new features coming out in that space that really make it easy for the low-code journey to work well with clients. And on the right there, the Copilot, acknowledging that everything that Microsoft does has a Copilot and AI that's coming out available for it now. It's growing all the time. And same with the IP that Velrada is bringing. We're tying in tightly to that Copilot journey. So you don't have isolated pieces of AI anymore. You've got a whole platform of integrated AI across all the different technologies you need to use. Power Worker for Assets itself. This is a bit of a flywheel around the focus of this. So it's about connecting enterprise assets with field workers. So it's an accelerator tool that focuses on your assets themselves. So the whole life for traditional assets, linear assets, fixed assets. We see a lot of different ownership models as well. So there's your traditional, like, we own the asset, but there's also where, we're working on a asset that's owned by our customer. So it's a different life cycle or management of that data. But then there's situations where you actually share the ownership of the asset as well. So that means a shared cost model and the impacts of that. So managing that through the platform. Coming down through the left, we've got facilities. So often you're going to have a facility full of these assets that you need to work in. You've got to plan and execute routine services and asset inspections. Down into your insights, so really bringing to life all of the ecosystem in effective visuals and dashboards, taking advantage of the Microsoft tooling with Power BI to be able to light up data across multiple systems and expose what's happening with your assets and that field worker lifecycle. Down into the project space, especially in this industry with oil and gas, there's a lot of large project work that occurs. If we think around turnaround and shutdown events, they're the larger scale of the projects, apart from construction, where you need a lot of planning and any inefficiencies in that process cost a lot of money. The problem isn't the cost of the maintenance, the problem is the cost of the downtime. If we have an extra day that we're down, that costs too much. We need to minimize that and make sure we stick to our plans and our projects, which means getting all the way from the top level of the project plan down to the execution, talking together and feeding back up. Coming down the bottom there, we've got the frontline workers. So really that workforce management solution to help those frontline workers be efficient and giving them the tools in their hand that work offline when they're actually in the facilities. Coming across into supply chain, this is crucial for any of these sorts of events and your projects. You need to be able to plan when your materials and your contractors are going to be available to actually deliver the services that you require. And heaven forbid we mention something on Microsoft on this slide, but SAP is mentioned because we know in industry it is very common. And whether it's an SAP or a Maximo or an IFS, we've designed Power Worker to connect with these systems so you can actually interact with them to get the right outcome. There's a lot of rich features in the EAM module of Dynamics for managing your assets, but quite often you might still have another finance system that we need to interact with that has that sort of detail. So really we're trying to help you work through that full process, being able to visualize the flow of information, understanding where you've got a linear asset, a flow where you take one element out in your actual process flow, well, the whole thing stops. So being able to manage your scheduling and your maintenance based on the impact of that maintenance is very important. If I talk about a pipeline that starts with a well through to a production plant, if I take out one piece of the pipeline, the whole thing stops. So I'm best to try and organize as much maintenance on that pipeline to occur at the same time, rather than saying each week, well, today we're working on the well, tomorrow we're working on the pad, the day after the pipeline. That's too much outage. We bring through the visuals to try and help you understand the impact or the blast radius of an outage that you're planning, and then kind of plan that maintenance to get it in the right order to minimize those sort of downtimes and make sure you're meeting those levels for your clients as to your production output as you go along. So through here, we mentioned obviously linear assets, dealing with multiple sites. Customer contracts is very crucial. We start to dive into things such as service level agreements and the concept of abatements. We see with a lot of clients, if they don't meet the expectations of their clients, that they actually have clawback clauses and abatements that come into play. So it's very important to manage those and understand what is our priority in what actions we're going to take now to make sure that we're maximizing production, minimizing downtime, and not getting abatements come into play. Obvious things when it comes to maintenance, managing the work execution and the not to exceed situations as well. And then the typical challenges of managing your bulk asset creation, refurbishing of assets, and dealing with the multiple hierarchies that you see in asset structures as well. It's not always as simple as parent down to a child, often there's different aspects you need to pull together into the hierarchy of those assets. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, David. Appreciate it. So, excited to have, folks here that have been in the industry for quite a bit of time, can relate to every aspect of the asset lifecycle. So as we go through this, think from whether it is oil and gas industry, if you're in the utility industry, facilities maintenance, where you're creating some of these things, and even manufacturing, going through the process. A lot of these steps, I think you'll all be able to relate to. So when you think of asset design, with some of the task management that you have to do, what dependencies are there needed, collaboration. I mean, more and more people are working together. Everyone's leveraging teams and keep everything in one place, as well as documentation, document management, quickly the ability to get information. And then as you're going through this, understanding what your portfolio is, what's it going to take to do it? Do you have the proper resources in order to design and set these things up? And then from a construction standpoint, your project planning, your work breakdown structure, who's going to be doing what, your milestones. There's going to be permits that you have to get. And so there aren't many systems out there that can do that. So you'll be able to see with the Power Platform, we can be nimble and design different ways of establishing your permits, budget versus actual, or overall financial reporting from a project. How are we doing? Are we behind? Keeping all your constituents up to speed as far as what's going on. And then finally, once it's done, we're creating an asset. And so there's some things within Dynamics that we're able to do is, hey, once we've completed this construction, now we've got this asset that we're going to need to now then maintain. So understanding key things such as an asset hierarchy. Is this a linear asset? The blast radius, meaning, hey, if something stops or something goes down, what's impacted? So if you think of utility, we have a transformer that's blown, what customers are affected. Understanding planned, unplanned maintenance, scheduling capabilities. There's a variety of things that get scheduled, whether it be equipment, people, crews, understanding all of that. And of course, mobility, the folks out in the field being able to, their focus is, I just need to get the job done. I don't need a complex system in order to, making sure I'm not fat fingering something when I'm putting something in, in a mobile device. How do we make it simple? And then as David mentioned, if we're talking to an external system, SAP or an IFS or a Maximo, ways that we've integrated. So this is kind of what we're going to walk through today. So we'll start with design. So from a well-designed project, for instance, so we'll stick with we've got a lot of folks here from the oil and gas industry. So if you think about when it comes to designing a new well, what does it take? There's many different steps, milestones, many different people involved. If you take a look at this screen here across the top, we have what we call business process flows. So we can see in the steps, where are we in the overall progress of whether it be, the segment of a project, the overall portfolio of what's happening, what type of do we have here, percentage complete, so we can monitor all of these things, as well as, what are the costs internally that we capture in order to, what's it taking to do this so that we could be more proactive in budgeting time when it comes to creating the next well-designed project. Next slide, please. So within here, we take a look at what are we going to be drilling? What's the well? What's the budget? The benefits that we're going to be receiving out of this that we might be able to forecast as far as the overall program details. Is it going to be, what's going to be the ROI is it going to make sense to go ahead and drill this well? As we get into understanding what are the well details, so here we have a well bore diagram. The ability within Dynamics to embed images. Part of that collaboration part is to understand, hey, what are we putting together here? If you notice down here also, the rig. So what's the rig that we might be using on this particular well? Is it in a location where we can get to the well? And is it going to have the proper attributes that are associated with it? Next one. And then, of course, as we get into the details, what are all the tasks, right? So, here are some examples as you might go through, the various tasks, various steps. And John, I know you're you're quite familiar with some of the things that are happening here from a collaboration standpoint, who it's assigned to. Maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the things that you've experienced.
Yeah, this type of tool is always great, right? Whenever you're managing, projects at scale, right? So, we're definitely in a place in the industry where we've standardized a lot of designs. So it's no longer, drilling, a couple wells over years time frame, right? We're drilling, hundreds of wells now at a time in what the industry calls, a well factory, right? So these tools are great whenever you're kind of in those factory kind of settings. You got a lot of projects going on. You get great visibility into those projects. Everyone can kind of come to the same place, see what the status is. And more importantly, in a commodity environment, plans are going to change, right? So we go into the year thinking we're going to, do this plan over the year. Well, market conditions happen, geopolitical events happen, right? Big changes happen. We need to reshift our priorities. So having kind of this backbone where you can kind of always come to kind of see what the status is, make those changes, and then kind of reprioritize and ultimately move forward to your new plan.
There's never any changes as we
No,
decide on that, right?
I think there's two interesting things as we kind of look at this view here. The first one is the system is very configurable, right? You don't have one size fits all, and every operator is going to have to use this exact same setup in the same format, right? You can use the system and match your business processes and your systems to work in Dynamics, right? So this is the way that Chevron has chosen to set up this system, right, for how they're going to plan wells. There's 100 ways to skin a cat, right? Somebody might have a different system. You set it up however works for you. And then even within your different business units, you may have Gulf of Mexico does it this way, Mid-Continent business unit does this way, Kazakhstan does it this way. I think the other thing here is this is a fantastic tool for collaboration, right? Probably buried somewhere in here, there's like a project team, right? Those can be internal users, those can be external users, right? Hey, my mud engineer is this person, my rig superintendent is going to be this person. This is going to be the other project drilling engineer who's associated with the project. And you've got everything here in a single pane of glass, as we like to say, right? Even 10 years ago, if this guy was a project drilling engineer offshore, he's probably carrying around a 3-ring binder in the office with all the stuff tabbed in there, right? I mean, that was literally, I saw that 10 years ago, 9 years ago. So this is a way better tool for collaborating and sharing data. Because when he's carrying the binder around, nobody else has a binder, right? Now it's all here right in front of you.
Yeah. Well, with those details, if we go to the next slide, I think this really expands on what you were just talking about. So here you've got, some of the key details, but I think one of the biggest things, if you take a look at this timeline and introducing Copilot, where we can quickly summarize everything that's occurred, working with other vendors, your external contractors, collaborating, leveraging, utilizing Teams. If you take a look at the right-hand side, this is where you can have your Teams chats. Not only if you look at other chats down over there, that's where you can monitor everything else that's going on in the other organization. But at the top, we can have a connected chat. So if you tap one more time there, David, I'm sorry, go back. But you can have strictly the details of the chat about this particular task that you're working with. So emails that you can go ahead and then capture. So automatically flowing in from Outlook. So leveraging the productivity tools that the vast majority of people have today, all the here, so you can focus on the tasks at hand. Next slide, please. And speaking of Teams, Dynamics is structured so that depending who you are, the role that you have, you can access the things that are most important to you at any particular time. Here's an example of this project within Teams. So if you're working in Teams, you just need to view or see a couple of things. It is all right there for you, so you don't have to, flip-flop between applications. And John, I know you're currently working through Power Roster with us in an evaluation type of a mode. But maybe explain how you're leveraging some of the Dynamics views.
Yeah, definitely popular. Anytime we can reduce the amount of screens that people are working in, right? So there's no surprise. Everyone has, you're working with Microsoft. You got Teams open every day, right? It stays open on your computer. No surprise there. Definitely getting a lot of positive feedback on having these views embedded right in Teams. Really just, making people more efficient. less clicks they got to do getting into the web, finding their links. So definitely always get positive feedback. The more stuff that we can access through Teams. Absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you. And then collaboration, document management, access to everything. Brian, you mentioned earlier, there's different ways to skin a cat, in a variety of different ones, but also there's some things that are repetitive. So if you've got tasks that are repetitive when it comes to understanding, oh, hey, for this casing job, I've got a workbook that I need to go ahead and link to. So here's an example based on this task. These are the things that I need to do, and I don't have to go fishing around to understand what it takes in order to complete this. And in this case, a casing pressure test.
Yeah, I mean, so just sticking on casing and tubing, right? One of the things you may want to have in here for if you've got a 4 or 5 string well design or even larger for the Gulf of Mexico, right? You're going to want that data sheet for the material properties and the connection for every string of casing that you're going to run, right? You just dump it in here. Because a lot of times drilling engineers like, I don't remember what the operating torque is for 5.5, 20-pound P110 ICY, right? Let me go reach out to my guy at X vendor and ask for that, right? Now up front, as soon as you decide on who your casing provider is going to be and you get all those connection data sheets and material properties, you just throw them in here, right? And then you're not looking for stuff because that happens 40 times, right? What bit am I using for the production hole? What casing am I using for the intermediate? What's the max operating torque? I can rotate my 7 5/8 liner down if I need to. All that stuff lives here, right? Rather than, as John said, getting off of Teams, getting into Outlook, sending an email, picking up the phone and calling somebody. I mean, if you do it right up front and you just dump everything in here, the data's at your fingertips 24/7.
Well, think about the questions you just asked. Those are things you could ask Copilot, and it could surface it up immediately as you're going through this process.
Yeah. I think you kind of hit on the holy grail too, because we have planning tools, right? Whether they're good or bad, but really connecting your tools to the field, I think that's always been a gap, right? They've never been the harder group to adopt products, we'll say, right? So definitely, if you can make something simple enough, accessible enough to where field users have access to it, that's definitely like a holy grail kind of in this bigger picture.
Yeah.
And last thing to point out, if you go back one slide, just what you're looking at behind the scenes, that is SharePoint. You can even see created on SharePoint. And so you can have your document repository connected, and it is the source of the truth. Just like Brian was saying, he's been a little casual about it, saying just dump your files in there, but you can put them in one central location, you can have version control. And so that when you come to this record in Dynamics, what you're looking at isn't just some file hanging out there in some system somewhere. It's the same file that an engineer back in the office, if you're on the rig, that you guys are looking at the same information. And so that's a really powerful detail that shouldn't go unstated. And that's really kind of the power of Microsoft when we work together across all of our tools, and we're continuing to bring more and more innovation across all of our tools to make it easier and easier to work within that Microsoft framework. Same security framework, licensing framework, everything. It just starts to really simplify things for our customers.
I think taking that and what you mentioned about Copilot, right? John may live in Dynamics and he looks at these screens and searches through this stuff all day and he knows where to go find those documents. If I'm a company man who just came back on Hitch after 2 weeks off, right, and I'm trying to find that same, where's my pressure test procedure? That's a great use case for Copilot, right? Because he might spend 15 or 20 minutes trying to dig around through SharePoint and find it, and then he calls John, and John gets him the answer, or it's like, hey, Copilot, find this for me, and he's got it in 10 seconds.
And then finally, to kind of wrap up, now we have all these projects that we're looking at from a design, and we're looking at the entire portfolio and here we're still in the design phase, right? How are we doing? How are we managing against them? And this is where you can make some strategic decisions. Hey, is this going to be profitable? Is it not going to be profitable? And decide to cut bait or continue to go forward. All right, so we've designed our asset. So at this point in time, we're going to go ahead and build it. And so as part of that process, we come up with a plan. There's going to be some permitting involved with that. Convert to another asset, and then ultimately report on that. And then we'll also talk briefly about integration to other project planning tools. So what you're looking at here is just an example of a construction project, right? So very simple, but similar to what you just saw earlier from a design standpoint. Same things are happening. Obviously, it's going to be a lot deeper, a lot more complex, but now we're also involving inventory. What parts we're going to need, the cost that's associated with it, external vendors, the cost that they're going to have associated with it. And as you go through this, are you tracking your budget versus actual? How are we trending against when this is supposed to be done and completed in each of these phases? What are some of the dependencies? So we can get ahead of ourselves in case if we're going to miss something, we can be proactive out there and alert other folks, hey, we're going to get a delay. And also help from a resource management planning standpoint so you don't have folks sitting around, maybe reassign them another engagements. So once we've got this entire thing built, the ability to go ahead and convert this to an asset. And what I love about this screen here is it brings everything together. So some information over on the left-hand side. In the middle, you've got the project plan that we've been working on, some scheduling information. But down at the bottom, based on the parameters that we've set on some templates, these are the assets that have now been created upon completion. So there's no scrambling to go ahead and build this. This is now something that is built within the Dynamics EAM module. So it's all there, one fluid step. Next slide, please. And then so from managing permits, as you go through this process, typically people have had old access, spreadsheets, Word documents, manila folders, files on SharePoint, things of that nature to go ahead and store a lot of custom applications. Now with the power of the Power Platform, you have the capability to go ahead and design your own permitting capability and system. So one more tick, please. And so here's an example from managing your permits. We can see here's all the permits that we have. Where are they in the process? So these are also could be tied to your project plan from a construction standpoint. So we know, hey, we've got these permits. You're accessing a Power App right within Dynamics as part of the overall project. And then finally, at the end of the day, everyone still does want some print. Does need a piece of paper. You can slap that permit on the 2x4 that's out there on site, and you can go from there. And then finally, from an overall reporting standpoint, looking at things a bit differently than from a design more the internal cost that we're tracking from when it comes to the actual construction. If this is something you're building for a customer, are we meeting budget? What are the costs? What's the revenue that we've generated as we've gone throughout this? So with Power BI and Fabric capabilities, we can pull data from a multitude of places to get to those key KPIs that you're looking for. All right, so now we've got our project, we got our asset constructed. So what about the maintenance? So we're going to talk a little bit about the hierarchy, linear asset capabilities. This is where Velrada has extended some of the capability within Dynamics. Blast radius, David mentioned this earlier, but it's understanding, hey, if there's a component of an asset that goes down, who or what else is affected as part of that. Unplanned and planned maintenance, we'll talk about customer service, work orders, situations where you've got lockout tagout. So if you have an asset that you're taking down, what's going to be affected downline from that, inspection capability, and then scheduling. Dynamics provides very powerful scheduling tools. We've created some things such as asset-based scheduling, roster management for understanding your crews, crew management, and then scheduling optimization, and finally mobile. What are some of the capabilities from the technician out in the field? And then we'll wrap up with Velrada's ERP EAM capabilities. So first, before we dive into some of that, it's really understanding the journey as to where you are from an asset maturity standpoint. I love this slide because being in the industry as many years as I have, everything has traditionally been reactive. They've sort of waited for something to break before they've gone ahead and fixed it. Then gets introduced, some preventative planned maintenance. So understanding, hey, based on an HVAC unit, we need to come out every 6 months to perform some cleaning to ensure this is going to A, meet warranty standards, but B, keep up and running. And then from there, maybe some condition-based maintenance, based on maybe other external factors, weather that could be impacting things. So go perform some maintenance. And then predictive. So understanding, hey, based on some data that we have, we think after X number of hours, this piece of equipment is going to go ahead and fail. So let's get ahead of it before we got a customer issue. And then cognitive maintenance or the intelligence. So now leveraging AI capabilities to understand, looking at all the assets within your portfolio, maybe some external assets of within the industry, what is typically happening here so we can be proactive and understanding, more about the system, but continue learning based on some failures that we might see to be more proactive in the future. So with that, often assets can be very complex, and understanding the hierarchy and all the components are part of it is important. So we talked about oil and gas earlier. We don't want to leave our utility and energy friends out of the picture here. So here we have an example of, Supreme Energy Company. And underneath here, we can get, at the highest level with this energy organization, and this be split based on a variety of different locations. But you can drive all the way down to a pole or a transformer or cross arm on that pole, all here within the application, even down to a tablet. So if you're out in the field, you've got visibility to all this if you need to understand how this is all tied together. Another powerful visual, just if you're taking a look at, a particular pole, these are the things that you see, for instance, that make it up. You've got a cross arm, you've got a transformer that's attached to it. And here's part of this, here's some of the details in understanding, what's going on in the maintenance. And I think that the powerful thing, Brian mentioned configurability within the application. Nick mentioned that as well. But within here is, depending on the type of asset you have, this screen is flexible so that if I say, hey, it's a pole, it's going to show all those attributes that are then associated with the pole, right? If it is for a transformer, those are all that form can adopt to what's key that you want to keep track of on that particular transformer. So some key things that you see here, what category it is, what functional location, the timeline. Don't have much happening here. This looks like it was probably just recently installed, but you could see a timeline, a summary of exactly what's going on from here. On the right-hand side, just from a two-dimensional standpoint, what are some of the sub-assets? But I think what's really important here when you tie back to the whole linear capability of all of this, who are some of the customers that attach to this pole? And so what happens down the line if, the transformer on this pole goes down? Who is affected here? And so down the line, it's going to have an impact, from a customer service standpoint, so you can be more proactive in letting somebody know we have an issue. So from the, diving into linear asset capability, Velrada has had the capability now to take some core dynamics and extend that functionality to give you a linear asset view. So here you're looking at a circuit and everything that's tied to it, all the poles that are tied to it, the transformers, the arms, and what houses might be affected as part of this. Going back to our oil and gas friends. So when it comes to a linear asset, when we're taking a look at, we see here, we've got our upstream assets, what the compressors are. We've got this pipeline now that is the linear asset that's tied to it, and all the components that are associated. So we've got, an understanding of all these, and if there's a PM that needs to be performed on this compressor, what's going to be the impact to anything else downstream, so we can be proactive when it comes to shutdown maintenance for it. So from a linear asset details, we've seen, visually, but here within the system, here's where we can see, what those segments are, for instance, whether it be that circuit or that pipeline, and what are the reference components underneath that ties everything together.
Just another key one on this screen about linear assets is these ones don't have values, but the start and end against segments.
Yes.
So you can actually say, okay, it's 3 meters, X feet down, meter line that we need to look at. So
yeah. The other thing that's important, something we refer to as the blast radius. So if a transformer goes down, what is going to be the impact of this. So these are the I talked about it, but here's an example of what happens when if a transformer is blown.
And then the blast radius concept is incredibly important. We see it all the time. If I'm going to turn this thing off and perform work on it, what else should I be doing at that time? But when you start tying all these assets together and you have this view, then you can start asking really complex questions like, okay, how much is this going to cost me if we do this now? And you can really start looking at all the things that are impacted. And that sounds like, again, a very simple question, and it is, but it's a very complex answer because you need to know all the things that are connected to an asset. If you perform maintenance here, what are you giving up? What are you losing? And to your point earlier about doing a turnaround, every minute, every hour that you're down has a cost to it, especially you think of a refinery scenario. Well, this is a similar concept. If I'm going to take this offline, what am I going to lose? Whether it's upstream production, whether it's power to my customers, customer dissatisfaction, revenue from those customers for power consumption, whatever it might be, you can start asking those questions when you have all this information tied together and getting very intelligent answers, make much more informed decisions about your business. So
the maintenance side of the house, planned and unplanned. What are some of the key things that are happening here? So you're just talking about from a customer service standpoint. So somebody calls up, here we've got, a call center, you've got visibility to everything that's gone on with the customer. If you take a look at the screen, I think one of the key things is when it comes to customer service is understanding your customer. And so this is where you've got a complete history of everything that's gone on. The co-pilot highlights is so key to this because you could have a ton of conversations, but when you're answering that call, a quick summary of what's going on so you're able to talk intelligently with the customer and understand what's happening. And if a customer is reporting an outage, quickly they can jump to the screen to see, okay, who is affected, what other customers. Now, at this point in time, this is where I can go ahead and right from this map, create an outage message out to those people that are affected. And that could be, if you hit one more time there, David, that could be a co-pilot draft that is either sending an email or a text message to these folks. Maybe they're at work, but they now are prepared before they come home. Hey, you know what? You got a power outage, or let them know. Let someone in the house take some stuff, get in the freezer, whatever it might be, so you don't, lose anything from there. But the key is customer satisfaction, being proactive to any potential issues that you might have. So, in the basics of it all now, so we realize we've got to send somebody out there. So here's just a basic work order capturing everything that needs to be done. Who's the primary contact that I've got to go ahead and deal with. There's something called an incident that's going to help the technician who's going out there. These are the tasks that I'm going to need to go ahead and perform. All that is tied together. And again, if you see that business process flow, this gives an indication as to where we are in the process. So if they do call up in a customer service or via the portal, they can go ahead and check and see where they are. And when they're coming, you see later in the mobile app, understand that, hey, the technician's coming down the street. I'll be ready to go ahead and greet them at the door. And here's just an example where you can see, hey, these are all the tasks that I need to do. At the same time, you've got visibility to, if I'm going out to fix something, is there a PM coming up? Let's go ahead and take care of that now, so it's going to save me a trip later.
I think integration's another good one there too, because you may be doing some of these processes with another system. Take SAP, for instance. The work order generation may occur in SAP, but like we talked about earlier, I may want to dispatch that out to somebody using a different system, and then they may perform that work doing another system, right? And by using Dynamics in the Power Platform, you can integrate and tie all those things back together. You don't just have to, you're not just stuck with one system that does 30% of the work, right? You can integrate all these things together, which I think is really cool.
So here's just an example. Everyone does things a little bit differently from a lockout tagout perspective. But when it comes to managing and understanding that, we've got a boilerplate that we can go ahead and start with, but then configure it to go ahead and match your all's processes as you move through the process of the maintenance and understanding what's the downstream effects of it. Another thing that's also very important when it comes to maintenance is inspections, right? So Dynamics provides a very deep and rich inspection capability. But if you're just performing inspections, Power App can also come in and do that for you. So we provide a lot of flexibility, understanding the types of inspections that you might have to go ahead and create that inspection form or forms that match your exact criteria.
And I think this is a great example where the one platform used across the business, your technicians and your schedulers have those other experiences. But here, where I'm a QA person, I'm just doing inspections. I've got a much more tailored to what I'm doing. So one platform, different experiences for what suits the different users.
Exactly. So David, we're going to turn things over to David from a scheduling standpoint.
So Dan mentioned briefly this idea of the asset-based scheduling. So if you look at your project plans, it goes down in details of all the tasks that you need to complete. And when you go into a field service mode, you're focusing on who's going to get the work done. But one of the other aspects, especially when we're talking about linear assets, is that you want to have a look at this asset sort of view as to the scheduling aspects. So a little bit small in my screenshot, but I've got a pipeline mentioned here with a well, pads and pipeline aspects in there. And these little blue bars are my maintenance activities that I'm having. Now, I can see a problem with my maintenance plan right here is that in that one pipeline, I've got two sets of maintenance happening on different days. Now, that means I've got an extended outage. Whereas if I could get them to be overlapped, it's going to reduce my outage situation. Now, what I also can see in here is other pipelines. So that allows me to know if across my 3 pipelines, I can achieve a throughput of 110 and my processing plant can take a throughput of 90. Well, generally, we're not running at full capacity across my 3 pipelines. So if I take one of them out, maybe I can still produce 90 per day. But if I'm only contracted at the moment for 55, maybe I can be performing more maintenance right now while I have a lower demand that I'm trying to supply for. So this visual is trying to give you that ability to plan that maintenance and move it around to say, well, these are reactive tasks. These are little preventive maintenance tasks. Let's get the right plan here for our outage to achieve that production throughput. And especially down the bottom there where I see the plant has actually got maintenance, that's a great time to go and maintain everything else because you know you've got no throughput happening. Larger view of what I've just been talking about. Yeah. Next is just to talk about Power Roster and the rostering aspects here. So to talk through this particular diagram. So we've talked through the execution of work. There's a lot of activities in field service about the scheduling of that execution of work. But the question is who's actually available to do the work in location? When we're talking about people requiring to drive into site or even to fly into site, they might even work at multiple locations. So just knowing that John is working today is not enough. I need to know where he's working. Through Power Roster, we start the journey with understanding what that demand is for staff. So that can come from historical analysis about the amount of jobs we get as a utilities company when it comes to reactive work and planned work. It could be maintenance plans that we have for work that we're going to be conducting tells us our demand for staff. And when we're looking at offshore, this is quite a critical metric because it's not just how many people do I need to do this work, but I've got a maximum heads on bed that I can actually have on the rig. And so I've got to adjust my staffing to account for that. So less critical roles might actually get shipped off so we can actually get this particular maintenance done. And there are plenty of other sources such as Excel spreadsheets when it comes to our demand for staff. So this gives us what we call our demand plan and allows us to then build out our roster plan. So in a roster, we're going to put in the positions that we need, and we're going to say, well, these are the skills associated or the personas with that. So we can feed that in. Quite often, the persona information might actually come from an external HR system, where it might also feed in some details about some credentials, inductions, and that you need to know about who is allowed to be deployed for this work. We allocate our resources, and they also typically are existing in other HR systems with all their LMS information about what they're accredited for, and we're going to match them together. They have a frontline experience that whether it's through Teams or the mobile app, they can see when they're rostered to go out to site, what shifts, day, night, other types of shifts they're going to be working, and they can apply for leave and also request things like shift swaps if it's appropriate, or extensions if someone's not made the flight. All right, we're going to pick somebody who's going to be extended. Who can I nominate? Can they confirm that they're available to stay an extra day? Ultimately, this feeds through into the field service universal resource scheduler. So when you're looking at that schedule board to say who can do this job today, you have a very accurate understanding as to who's available on site to do that work. This is just an example of one of our roster screens. So I can see in my calendar here the dates across the top, and then I can see an unallocated shift that I need to fill, and then I can see my line inspection and maintenance crew and the shifts that people are working. Now, the reason that we have that particular shift up here in the unscheduled is because down here we can see that Alan Jones has an absence that has been booked in. So we can see across the system it's going to bring in not just the information about this roster I'm trying to do, but it's going to pull in if they have any leave. And it's also going to visualize in here if they've got shifts on another roster. So I might have someone who is off swing for my particular rig, but they might be doing some backfill work somewhere else. That's quite crucial if I want to work out if they can stay longer or start earlier, having that visibility of the whole picture as to what they're doing in my roster.
So, John, you're, currently going through the process of this. Maybe talk a little bit about, some of the ways that you're.
Definitely. So, we've been evaluating Power Roster and definitely had my hands on it a lot over the last 6 months. But I think on the previous slide, David showed, what our external sources are, and I think he painted a better picture with SAP and historical analysis. But I think the reality in asset-intensive industries is their Excel spreadsheets, right? And a lot of times my experience seeing these spreadsheets is you can't do anything with them, right? They're just heavily formatted, very little structure to them, right? So, I get excited about the possibilities that can happen, right? Of kind of moving your scheduling data into a system like this, and kind of things you're mentioning of really starting to kind of link schedules together, right? Because that's a little bit difficult to do in Excel, right? So being able to marry things up, see how things are interconnecting between your various regions, who's available across various regions, I think brings a lot of power whenever you're trying to manage your workforce, especially when you have a large global footprint. So.
Excellent.
Then we talked about there, you referred to it, the demand side of it. So this is the demand forecast chart that comes up on your calendar. So it's matching the dates that you're looking at, and you can actually see where you've got a particular forecast and how much staffing you have. Here, the red, I'm actually short. My demand forecast line is showing that I don't have enough staff consistently across this particular roster. But it's given me that very clear picture as to how many staff I have versus how many I need according to my forecast. And what can be very powerful is when you see it go above the line, and now you've got more staff than you need. So you can make those judgment calls as to how you address that, how you can make more use of those people by bringing more work forward, or can you let people finish early and not have as much overtime occurring by kind of balancing out the wave when it comes to your staffing needs.
If you're in operations, you're tracking utilization of people and resources all the time, right? It's top of mind every day when you walk in. This tool gives you the ability to predict surges in activity, right? You might look 1, 2, 3 weeks ahead and say, we need to pick up some contractor resources for this period, right? To get us through this very busy week. If you do that 2, 3, 4 weeks in a row, you start thinking about, we need to go out and hire 2 or 4 more people, right? So we've got to recruit, hire, then we've got to train, then we've got to get them in the field. This type of view, this is always done in Excel, right? This is a bunch of Excel spreadsheets put together, right? Of trying to predict what that work is going to look like down the road. There's so much power here in not just scheduling tomorrow or the next day, but being able to predict that the labor force you're going to need 3 and 6 months down the road, which is in asset intensive industries is huge. Because if you just go out and hire a bunch of people to cover that surge, right, you're going to turn around and lay a bunch of them off 3 months later, which nobody wants to do. So having the tools and the systems here to be able to link all that data together and make better decisions, it's going to make you a much more efficient outfit.
Yeah, another critical aspect too, I mean, you can do all this scheduling. There's very sophisticated scheduling tools, whether it's for personnel management or whatever it may be, but there's an aspect of simplicity that you need to, because you can't create something that's so hard to use, right? So always gotta remember who, your stakeholders are, who's actually doing the scheduling, and making sure we give them the right tool that they can actually, use the tool and not get bogged down in finding buttons or finding functionality of the software itself. So
That ties in a little bit to the next slide that's going to come up. So right now on the rostering, I'm focusing on who is going to be deployed where and when in terms of available staff. But then, as I mentioned before, that feeds into field service, where we actually go, okay, now that these people are working, what are they doing today? Here are the jobs I need them to complete. And if it's they're going to be driving around to complete these jobs at different locations, where are they going to be going to? What is the travel time that comes into that? And this schedule board, when it lights up on a day, you actually have a live tracking as to what is getting done and when it's getting done. So you can see if people are finishing work early, if anyone's running late, and if you need to readjust the day, especially in reactive utilities where you're dealing with an outage of power, you want to be able to go, Abraham's running late on his job. Let's see if, or Ricardo's finishing early, get him to do the next job so we can get this power on quicker.
And the customer always wants to know, right?
Yes.
We went through some of this in Houston over the summer. Your power goes down, everybody wants to know when it's going to come back on.
Yeah,
correct.
These kind of tools allow you to go, okay, if we get all this work done today and then we get that work done tomorrow, we'll bring this part of the line back online. Let's go ahead and tell these customers that, there's a very good chance they're going to have power in the next 18 hours, which without a system like this, you just can't do that. You're just guessing.
Exactly. The next one here is crew management. So we see in a lot of the utility space that people are moving around in crews, and they've actually got long-term plans of work to be done, and they require a crew of 5 every day, for example. So we've actually got some additional constructs that we can deploy in field service around a daily board. So you can have that, this particular, all of my crews, here's my minimum staffing level and different skills that are required in there. And it provides a visual along the top of this as to when you're meeting that crewing requirement on a daily basis. And then you're scheduling, and Dan's letting me know the next slide actually shows it larger. Then you're actually scheduling based to the crew instead of to the individual, which is quite often how the work is done. And so you can schedule to the crew months in advance without knowing who the daily person is going to be at this point in time. But then the next aspect to that, that's dealing with the daily. But generally what will happen is people will be assigned to a crew 4 months at a time. And the little yellow bars here are where someone's actually not available. So those are the days where I'm going to backfill them in that particular crew. But I can actually manage their crew assignment over a larger length as well. So it just really kind of helps in that crew management side of it. Then from a mobile aspect, this is just a bit of an example of sort of completing some of those tasks that you've got in a checklist. The service tasks need to be completed, and then the start and reference point.
Yeah, and I think one thing I want to point out here for the screen to the left is, taking into account health and safety. So before you start the job, is the surrounding area free of hazards? Do you have your gloves? Do you have your helmet, your boots? Some of the key things. And one thing that's important to note, everyone's going to have different requirements when it comes to this. And Dynamics is extremely flexible from a configuration standpoint. And one thing to note too, I've been in the field service product space for many years, and typically what I found is the mobile app has a different development platform than the regular client app. So what you have with Dynamics is you have one development platform for everything, whether it be the configuration tool with Power Apps or the mobile capabilities or the core module capabilities within Dynamics. It's one development platform that you have. And here's just some additional screenshots, some of the details. So, complete offline capabilities, signatures, so you can have it set up so you get signatures from the client, signatures from the technician, understanding where you are, where you've got to go. And also with the mobile app, you have all the capabilities of whatever the mobile tool is. So you've got your gloves on. You just need to hit the button that says talk, and you can go ahead and talk into phone and, these are the notes that I did. In addition to that, the Copilot features that Microsoft provides can go ahead and automatically summarize everything that you've done from the work order, access to knowledge, previous jobs, detailed asset information. They're talking about the hierarchy before. All that is at your fingertips. And I think finally, we do understand, particularly in oil and gas, utilities industry, other folks are working with other ERP systems. So, and that's where Powerful Worker for Assets, the connected capabilities come into play. If you just hit one more time, David. Oops. So, but from here, it's understanding, from the start, from the planning, all the way through the construction to the ongoing maintenance, but feeding back to that back office. And whether you've got a Maximo, or we can then take those planned jobs, planned tasks, come back into Dynamics for your unplanned maintenance, your break fix type stuff. We can then send that back up into the system so everyone is aware of everything that's going on.
And I guess that's one of the clients I've been working with. They do their big turnaround in SAP. They pass it down to Primavera to do the scheduling aspect that goes as granular as this job in the 3-day window, and then down to field service to say, when are we actually going to do it? Who's going to do it on the day?
Excellent.
And all the way back up.
All right, so we have taken up the full hour here, but we really appreciate everybody who's joined. John, Brian, Nick, David, thank you all for attending. Anything else you may want to add?
I wanted to ask John one more question before we finish. There is mine. A lot of times when we get into these conversations with customers, right, it seems like more often than not, an opportunity will stall or fizzle out because the customer decides to just stay with business as usual, right? And in Chevron's journey, what pushed you guys over the edge to say, we're going to go ahead and invest in these tools and systems because we think they're going to make a difference?
Yeah, I think a big key about it is that people want products tomorrow. And if you are quick enough to start delivering products, it fizzles out, they move on to the next thing, right? Or the business cycle ends, they move on to the next thing, right? One thing I appreciate about this concept of Microsoft and using an ISV, someone like Velrada, right, where you got their IP, someone like a Chevron, right? We have a very large power app community, a lot of infrastructure in place. So combining, the platform plus some IP from an ISV can really help us really accelerate and get products in front of people faster. And I think that really helps. People are still energized. They're still excited. They get the product. They see it. It's not 2 years. It's on the order of months. You really accelerate that timeline, and it ultimately helps with the success of the product going forward. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. It's perfect, right? Move quickly.
Yep.
So thanks for that.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you for attending, and thank you all.